Greetings, I'm back with another vlog, and this time from my land. You saw me roam around in Russia, Sri Lanka and South Africa, and now I have come here in India to bring you this vlog. Behind me is an old Indian Air Force plane, and this place where I'm standing right now holds the history to the Indian Air Force. Now when you come here, you see decades pass in front of you. You see the years of 1932 to 1943, when the first time a manned aircraft was made. Behind me is the 1953 model of the Indian Air Force, which played a crucial role in getting us Jammu and Kashmir back. With this plane, we start the history of the Indian Air Force, and I take you through the journey in time of all the planes that have been listed here and give you some important facts about the Indian Air Force. Behind me in this hangar is this place frozen in time since 1942. When the Indian Air Force craft first made a thundering halt in Burma, that was in 1945, this was the plane that was used to bomb and decimate the forces of Japan. This was a Japanese Hawker. It was made in September 44, a piloted missile for suicide attacks. That's the kamikaze attack. At the speed of 620 miles per hour, this beast was one of the suicide planes that was used to decimate the Japanese forces. As you can see, there's no seat here in this plane. And if you look there, you see the manufacturer's flag. It was made in Japan, and the irony is it was used against Japan. Behind me is the Wapiti, which was manufactured in the year 1933 to 1942. It was amongst the starting fleet that honored the Indian Air Force. This plane gives you the vibe of the World War II. If you see that stark resemblance, you'll notice that the plane during these era, particularly in the 1933 and the 1942, had these two-wing system. Now, this plane in particular was a two-seater, one for the pilot and the other for the co-pilot. There were two motors used in the earlier versions of the Indian Air Force plane. The first one used to move the fan that you see here. Right here was the first engine. The other engine for this plane would accompany right at the back where the missile system would be resurrected. This piece behind me is the reminiscence of the starting years of the Indian Air Force. The years that laid the foundation for this big, massive unit that became the third biggest air force in the world. By the time the Indians were nearing the independence, the size of planes and the types of plane had changed. This was the transforming stages of the Indian aircraft. The plane that you see behind me is the first aircraft plane that was used in the Pakistan war as well. This plane was made and manufactured in 1943. And as you can see, the name here is Lysander. Lysander was again made in UK. And this was again a two-seater plane, which was a stark contrast from how it started in 1932 with a single-seater plane and those suicide planes that I showed you earlier. By this time, the Indian Air Force had started to get its flag. And as you can see, that time the flag used to be of red, white and blue, majorly of the colors of the empire. When these planes were used in the World War II, India was amongst those small countries that participated on the side of the Britain. And these planes, particularly the ones that you see here, the kamikaze not so much, but this plane, the Lysander, was amongst the starting ones that was used during this time. It was after the World War, seeing the mighty force of the Indian Air Force, that the British government had to give India the name the Royal Indian Air Force. Only the second country to be labeled the Royal Air Forces, apart from Australia, obviously. During the World War, this was one of the planes that was used for fighting for the Britishers. This plane is known as the Tempest, one of the mightiest planes of the time. It had a 2,520 HP Bristol Senatorius 5 motor inside. This beast used to carry a weightage of around 1 ton. And the carrier had its bomb right beneath its wing. By this time, the Royal Indian Air Force had started to get its color. As you can see, they already had the saffron white and the green. The biggest problem realized during the early years of the aircraft industry was flying and landing the plane smoothly. And this was the first plane that was used by the pilots as the safest plane around at that time. Used for training around 5,000 pilots at the time of 1950s, this plane was a part of the Flying Instruction School. The fabled tale of the Gnat is a name to be revered in the Indian history. It plays an important role in the India-Pakistan War of the 1961. By 1961, Pakistan had realized that the Indian military force was a little weak in 1947. This was the time when they decided to embark upon a journey of the aircrafts and the air forces. And to match that, India had its version of the Gnat. These were the first planes that were used during the liberation of the Bangladesh War. The Bangladesh Liberation War had Pakistan at the time fighting with India. With 4 Pakistani sabres, only 2 Gnats were required to bring them down. The Z mark that you see here isn't from the Russian Air Force, it's from the Indian Gnat. And as you can see, by that time, since India had achieved its independence, you could see the tricolors right on the wings and the tails of this plane. You know, when we look at these planes, we just take them for granted, but this has been a part of the Indian history. It's the Indian history that unfolded during these times that I passed through in the freezing stages, kept here in this small hangar in Pal. So far, we learned how Ayub Khan and Zulfikar Ali Bhutto at that time had the plans to take over Kashmir, and the Indian Air Force was a part that liberated Kashmir from the hands of Pakistan. This craft, frozen in the times of history, was a part of Pakistan's devious plan to take Kashmir. You can see the bullet marks on this plane. Maybe it was the fighter Indian aircraft that took over the Pakistani sabre, but this is the excitement and the history of wars if you want to learn that.